to try to catch some internet for this.
Well, I thank you for your persistence. And Tom, I was telling the group a little bit about you and how you ended up in Costa Rica, but also that during this difficult time, there has been so many questions regarding immunity. There's so many questions regarding, you know, the COVID-19, like we talked about in our podcast. You have been impacted directly by all of this. And of course, you have millions of followers that are asking you questions and you're guiding them. And we just thought that if you could give us a little bit of a foundation about what's your perspective in all of this, and maybe answer some of the questions that maybe our mentees will have, I know you will bring tremendous value to us, like always.
Well, thank you. And thank you for that, Fab. It's a pleasure to do this, and I'm going to share screen here. Oh, Fab, you have to allow me to share screen. As the host, you have to...
No worries, I'm on it.
Okay.
You're good.
Okay, let's try again here. Yes, we are. Good, good, good. Okay. So I see my screen is up there now. Let's get into a presenter's mode. Okay. Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be with you. And I understand the questions that Dr. Mancini has asked me to address, and it's a pleasure to do so. First, big thanks to Dr. Fab. As you all know, he's a great guy. And if anyone models positive ways to get through whatever crisis comes up, he's the guy. And proud to call him a friend, so thank you for this opportunity. When we talk about COVID, we've got to get a bigger picture than COVID. We have to understand, where does this come from? How come not everyone's getting sick? So I'm going to give you about 20 minutes of a big picture. And then we'll go right to Q&As, and for as long as you like and time allows, we'll do specific questions. But the big picture concept is one that not too many people have heard of in the past. And I'm going to start with Professor Alessio Fasano. If you can see the screen, he's Professor of Pediatrics at Harvard Medical School, Professor of Nutrition at Harvard School of Public Health, Chief, Pediatric Gastroenterology, Director, Mucosal Immunology Center, Harvard, Director, Center for Celiac Research, Harvard. This guy has so many credentials that any one of them is a lifelong goal for someone at the top of the field. We think that he's going to win the Nobel Prize. We truly do, because he and his team identified this thing that we now call leaky gut back in 1997, and they've been publishing study after study about it ever since. And I know you can't see the paper in the bottom right of your screen. This is a paper he came out with earlier this year. Now, a guy at this level in what he does in the world, he's always squeaky clean about what he says. His language is meticulous because he knows how easy it is to be misquoted. And if he's misquoted, sometimes marketing companies, nutrition companies will take advantage of that. So he's very careful about what he says. If you could see the title of this paper, you would see that the title is "All Disease Begins in parentheses, leaky gut." The role of zonulin, now that's the protein that causes leaky gut. The role of zonulin-mediated gut permeability in the generation of chronic inflammatory diseases. All disease begins in the gut. Well, what about a viral infection from a compromised immune system? All disease begins in the leaky gut. What about MS? All disease. What about Alzheimer's? All disease. If you understand this big picture, any inflammatory disease begins in the gut. So whenever you're addressing a disease or prevention of a disease, you have to also address the gut as part of your focused protocol to protect you. And he tells us that there are 5 elements in the development of inflammatory diseases. And for those of you that may not be familiar with the term, Every degenerative disease is an inflammatory disease, every single one of them: cardiovascular disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, rheumatoid, psoriasis, alopecia, losing your hair. Every chronic disease is an inflammatory disease. And there are 5 elements that set this up. Then it just depends on your genetics as to where it's going to manifest in your body or your family's body. I love this picture because if you could see the guy close up, you'd see that his left knee is bent, his left foot's against the wall, hands in his pocket, just kind of leaning against the wall there, as comfortable as can be, in the midst of all this chaos. That there's a perfect storm that develops for chronic inflammatory diseases that starts with your genetics. Next, it's how the environmental triggers that we're exposed to, that means the food that you eat, the air that you breathe, that's all part of the environment. The emotions that we create from too much stress is all part of the internal environment. That affects your microbiome, the good guys and the bad guys in the gut. And when you get an altered microbiome, it's called dysbiosis, an altered microbiome. Too many bad guys, not enough good guys, which creates the leaky gut, technical term intestinal permeability, which then will manifest in your system as an inflammatory disease. And that's just determined by your genes as to where it's going to manifest. But this is the perfect storm in the development of all chronic diseases. So when you're thinking about, well, how do I strengthen my immune system? You have to keep in mind, this is the mechanism. And when it's out of balance, it weakens your immune system. So you're more vulnerable to whatever you're exposed to. So we always want to keep this in mind. If there's one concept that becomes the foundational paradigm you look through about all chronic inflammatory diseases, this is it. These 5 pillars, so that your decisions about your health care, about the programs that you might want to implement for yourself or your family or your team, those decisions are to be flavored by this big picture concept. And when you operate this way, you start dialing down specifically what your body needs to avoid the perfect storm. So it's the 3 in the middle that we really have a lot of control over. Your environment, how it affects your gut, the good guys and the bad guys in your gut, and whether or not you develop intestinal permeability. You can't do anything about your genes. That's the deck of cards that you were dealt. It's whether they get turned on or turned off that's important, and that's determined by the 3 in the middle there. So I'm going to talk for a moment about the environmental triggers. Where do you start in trying to figure out what environmental triggers are? Well, Professor Fasano tells us in this paper, the 2 most powerful triggers are too much of the bad bacteria in your gut and the exhaust of that bacteria. That's called LPS, lipopolysaccharides. And this is what causes eventually sepsis in your body, is too much of the bad bacteria getting into your bloodstream. So LPS and gluten, those are the 2 most powerful triggers. Now, Professor Maureen Leonard, also at Harvard, in 2017, she published a review article in the Journal of the American Medical Association. And she looked over 64 studies on this topic. And the summary in the article in the Journal of the American Medical Association says, previous studies have shown that the proteins in wheat cause immediate and transient increase in gut permeability. This takes place in all individuals who ingest wheat. So if you eat wheat, you get leaky gut, transient intestinal permeability. Every person, all individuals. Now, I think that's restricted to humans. So if you're human, this relates to you. Now, it doesn't matter how you feel when you eat wheat. Well, I feel fine when I eat wheat. I don't have a problem with pizza. It doesn't matter what you feel, because the inflammation causing the symptoms, eventual symptoms, the ratio is 8 to 1. For every 1 that gets gut symptoms, there are 8 that don't. They get brain symptoms or weakened immune system symptoms or skin symptoms or joint symptoms. They get arthritises, they get chronic fatigue, they get Epstein-Barr. So the ratio is 8 to 1. So you can't think, I don't feel bad when I eat wheat, and use that as a criteria whether or not you need to check this out. Now, I never say that every person needs to stop eating wheat. You'd sound like a fanatic. What I do say is that every person who's concerned about their health and the function of their bodies needs to test, just properly test to see if your immune system says you got a problem with wheat. And the test is called the wheat zoomer because you zoom in on the problem. And you can go to my website or just Google it. You can learn a lot more about the tests and have your doctor do the test, the wheat zoomer. Nothing is as accurate as that test. But this happens in all individuals. You get gut permeability. Why does this happen? How could this be? I've grown up on wheat. How in the hell can this be a problem for me? Wheat, the proteins in wheat activate something in your immune system called toll-like receptor 4. Now, I know some people here are not physicians and are not familiar with this term. What is toll-like receptor 4? It's a sentry standing guard just inside the first part of your small intestine. Mrs. Patient, you have the same body as your ancestors thousands of years ago, the same kidneys, the same heart, the same gallbladder, the same bones and muscles and joints and immune system. Everything works the same. Our brains are developed more, so we've got food all the time and housing, we're protected, but our bodies work the same. Our ancestors, their primary concern was food, shelter, and protection. So they're foraging for food. When they find something, first they smell it, then they taste a little bit of it, and then they eat it. And if there was bad bacteria in that food, but they couldn't smell it, it wasn't enough to have a putrid smell, the hydrochloric acid in your stomach is designed to kill it. That'll kill anything. But if the acid in your stomach does not kill the bad bacteria from the food that our ancestors ate, and that food residue comes out of the stomach into the first part of the small intestine, that's where the sentries are standing guard to protect you, toll-like receptor 4. They're throughout the body, but they're right inside the first part of the small intestine, so that if anything comes out of the stomach that's not supposed to be there, they activate the messaging for inflammation and leaky gut right away, within 5 minutes of food coming out of the stomach into the first part of the small intestine. And you don't feel any of this. You can't tell. You don't feel it. Toll-like receptor 4 was designed to protect us from bugs, from bad bacteria coming out of the stomach into the first part of the small intestine. That's what job. And as Professor Fasano tells us, gluten is misinterpreted by this protective pathway as a potential harmful component of a bug. Every time you eat wheat, your body thinks you're getting a bug, and the sentries standing guard there get activated to protect you, just to protect you. So they activate this inflammation cascade. That is how the environmental triggers, number 2 of the 5 pillars in developing chronic diseases, begins by toll-like receptor 4 getting activated. And this happens with wheat in all individuals who consume wheat, without exception. The activation of this pathway by gluten may represent a defensive mechanism that flushes out, because when you get leaky gut, the space between the cells opens up a little bit, and water comes into the gut. And what's it for? It's like a garden hose on the driveway. You got caked mud on the driveway, you got to wash off the mud. Well, you get a leaky gut, so water comes into the intestines, so you flush out whatever the threat is. That's why this occurs. And it saves our life every day. But when you have toast for breakfast, sandwich for lunch, pasta for dinner, your whole body has to compensate from being constantly in a state of diarrhea. And that goes on for years and years and years, and more inflammation and more inflammation and more inflammation. And you don't feel any of this until you cross a line of tolerance. Another complication when these sentries get activated is that they affect the receptor on the gut. microbiota, when it gets activated, it changes the quantity, the composition, the richness of the microbiome. So that's number 3 of the 5 pillars in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases. The environmental trigger activates the inflammation. That activation alters the microbiome, so you start getting a poorer, less defensive, less capable microbiome. And some of you may have heard that 70 to 80% of your immune system is in your gut, and it gets weakened every time we're exposed to wheat. Just this little bit, you know, it's like trying to do a bunt. Instead of going for a home run, you do a bunt, right? And you know, maybe the ball hits the ground, is just a little bit of an effect, but that happens with all humans when they ingest gluten. So you create this inflammatory cascade that's designed to flush out whatever the threat is that toll-like receptor 4 has identified. Gliadin activates toll-like receptor 4. Gluten is misinterpreted as a harmful component of a bug. In all individuals, 64 studies that Professor Leonard looked at and summarized in the Journal of the American Medical Association. So some of us are going, well, I'm not sure I'm going to buy that. You know, great, you know, it's up to you, man. My recommendation is that you are skeptical to this. Skepticism means, I'm not sure I buy this. I'm going to look into it a little further. Cynicism means, that's a bunch of hogwash. I'm not going to waste my time. But you've got the world's best people at Harvard that are publishing these studies right now, telling us this stuff. So I hope you're all skeptical and you don't go out and change your lifestyle right now, but you start asking smart questions. And your doctors may not know this, you know, so you have to find the right people to talk to. Dr. Fab can guide you in that. You can go to my website. I've got lots of information that you can look at there. The activation of the zonulin pathway by toll-like receptor 4 may represent a defensive mechanism to flush out bugs. So let's talk about SARS now, about this virus. I wanted to give you that first so that you understand, wow. So I'm like throwing gasoline on the fire, causing inflammation in my body all the time, you know, because I have a toast for breakfast or a bagel once in a while or a muffin, and have sandwiches for lunch or chicken noodle soup. And I have pasta for dinner or lasagna or croutons on the side. Wow, I'm doing that every day. Wow, okay, I'm gonna look into that. So let's take that background noise that sets you up for a compromised immune system. Now let's go into this current virus and what we're concerned about here. And my mentor, Professor Jeffrey Bland, the founder of functional medicine, said this to us. He sent us a message back in February when all the concern was starting to be voiced about this virus. It's important for us to remember that COVID is a lifestyle disease, remediated through the way we live, we act, we eat, and we socialize. It's the classic example of a personalized lifestyle healthcare issue. We'll always be confronted with communicable viruses. It's how we, as a global, each manage our environment, our lifestyle, and social structure that determines its pathogenicity. Why does he talk about it as a lifestyle disease? This comes from MedCram. These people have been doing great work on informing us for the last 7-8 months. And what this drawing shows is that all the way over on the left, the purple area, you've never been exposed to this virus. And the 0 day is the day that you're exposed. Now, most people will not have any symptoms whatsoever. Others, about 80% will not have any symptoms whatsoever. I'm sorry, that's the purple line. The ones that have been exposed to the virus, they have no symptoms whatsoever. Within 5 to 12 days now, at first we thought it was 5 days, then we realized, oh, it can be 12 days before you notice any symptoms. You start getting some symptoms. What we have to remember, now the symptoms can be mild, light fever, a sore throat, little cough, little diarrhea, then they're gone in a couple of days. You say, oh great, I'm fine now. No, you're not. 80% of the people didn't have any symptoms with exposure. You did. That means that your immune system wasn't capable of completely handling the virus, and you had to call up the troops. You had to rally the reserves. You had to generate a fever to kill this thing, or whatever your body did. So don't be fooled to thinking all is good in the world. I was exposed, I had a fever for a couple of days, I'm positive for the antibodies now, so I'm good. You've got a compromised immune system because it's on a scale of compromise, from just a little compromise to just completely burnt out, and these people have to go to ER. So do remember, if you had any symptoms, you need to look further into this so that you rebuild a healthier, stronger immune system. You aren't supposed to feel when you're exposed to viruses. Your body's supposed to take care of it right away. But those that started getting worse and had to go to the hospital eventually, that's the 20% that's identified at day 12. Ballpark 20%. And it was 50-50 how many of those that came in had to go into intensive care. This is the area where we really want to focus over on the left, so that we're one of the group. Okay, we get exposed to the virus, pretty hard to avoid being exposed. So you get exposed to the virus, my immune system's strong, I'm good to go, I'm protected. And then you go do a test for antibodies and you see, yep, you got the antibodies. So you were exposed, your body protected you, and now you're producing antibodies so that if you're ever exposed again, you're protected. That's the concept behind immunizations and vaccines. That's the concept. But if you've already got the antibodies, you're protected. So the goal is to be over in that area. Now, and over there on the left side, social distancing, I don't like that word at all. Physical distancing may be important, but not social distancing. If you're staying at home, you should be reaching out to your friends. You should be texting or FaceTiming. It's free now anywhere in the world to talk to people, but stay connected to people so we don't isolate and we're alone. And all the base hits, I always sign books the same. Base hits win the ball game. All the little things you do. I'm going to talk to you about 3 or 4 little things that you do to protect yourself. And they're all in my book. This book came out, You Can Fix Your Brain. And it's #1 in 7 categories on Amazon for brain function and neurological function, because we give you so many pearls of what you can do to protect yourself. And it doesn't matter if I said you can fix your heart, or you can fix your liver, or you can fix your joints, or you can fix your immune system. The concepts in there are the big picture of the 5 pillars in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases, and what are all the little things that you can do to protect yourself. So all that information is available to you there and in other sources. Dr. Fab is a wealth of information on resources. But the Journal of the American Medical Association came out in April and told us that if you had to be admitted to the hospital and you were put on ventilation, they looked at 5,600 patients in New York City. And if they were put on ventilation, 88% of them died. It's like, what? Yeah, ventilation is not, it's a last resort, it's a Hail Mary. It's the Hail Mary pass. So you don't want to get to that stage. So what are some of the things that science has showed us help with all of this? The clinical features of COVID are well documented, and most people displaying mild symptoms and none of, just like the flu. The same thing that happens with the flu every year is that it really affects the elderly and those that are chronically ill. No vaccine or antiviral agents are available for COVID, and the mainstay of treatment is supportive care. This is not the public perception as played out in the media. This is the British Medical Journal writing this to us. According to the US Center for Disease Control and Prevention, in the last 10 years, every year, symptomatic flu symptoms, viral symptoms, affect 9 million to 45 million people, resulting in 4 million to 21 million medical visits, 140,000 to 800,000 hospitalizations, 23,000 to 61,000 deaths. Every year this happens. So let's talk about vitamin D. Many of you have heard about vitamin D and how that may protect you. Well, here's a study that puts in perspective. This is 780 patients with COVID had vitamin D levels below 19, every single one of them. Your vitamin D levels below 19 and you're admitted to the hospital, every single one of them died. Those whose vitamin D was above 34, none of them died. None of them. And that sweet spot for the big transition in vitamin D levels, 80% of the people died if their vitamin D was less than 27 and a half. 20% of them died if their vitamin D was at 31. So where do you want your vitamin D level? We recommended between 50 to 75 nanograms, 50 to 75. And it's a really simple finger prick test. You can order it on my website. You go to your doctor and get it. It's such a simple, inexpensive test. There is no excuse for you and everyone in your family not checking your vitamin D level. No excuse. It's simple, it's inexpensive, and it tells you about your vulnerability. Here's a study that was published last month. What was it? September 17th. So that was 6 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago almost. Michael Hollick, very well-known researcher in vitamin D. With LabCorp, the largest laboratory service in the country, they looked at 190,000 people who were tested to see if they had the virus. And they also checked them for vitamin D. What did they find out? They found that you being positive to the virus was strongly associated with your vitamin D level. The lower your vitamin D, the more likely you're positive to the virus, meaning the virus is in your system, not the antibodies, the virus is in your system and it's shedding. It's at a high enough concentration that it's positive when tested for. The lower your vitamin D, there's 190,000 people in the US that they tested. Who's gonna argue with this? You need to know what your vitamin D level is. Our findings provide the impetus to explore the role of vitamin D supplementation in reducing the risk for SARS-CoV-2 infection and COVID-19 disease. Could they say it any clearer? This was the graph in that article. And it didn't it didn't matter if you were Black or Hispanic or white, non-Hispanic, it didn't matter. For everyone, the lower your vitamin D, the higher your risk of being positive to the virus. If you lived in the North, if you lived in the Central, if you lived in the South, it didn't matter. If you were male or female, it didn't matter. This was true for everyone. A previous study found that for each 4 points in increase in vitamin D is associated with a 7% decreased risk of flu. That's 1.75% reduced risk for every point that your vitamin D goes up. And in this study, it was for every point that your vitamin D level goes up, it's 1.6% reduced risk. So who's not going to check their vitamin D? I mean, it's inexcusable if you don't. It's simple, it's inexpensive. SARS-CoV-2 positivity is strongly and inversely associated with vitamin D levels. 190,000 people they tested this year. At best, vitamin D deficiency will be only one of many factors involved in determining the outcome of COVID. But it's a problem that can be corrected safely and cheaply. There's no downside to speak of and good reason to think there might be a benefit. It's a simple blood spot test. You poke your finger, you put your finger on the card for a drop of blood, you let it dry, you mail it to the lab, it comes back to you in 7 to 10 business days. You find out what your vitamin D level is. If it's low, you kick it up. Talk to your doctor or kick it up. It's simple, it's easy. You can find out more about it at my website, thedr.com/vitamin D test. It's a no-brainer and inexcusable. Any of my patients that don't get their vitamin D tested, I'm in their face because I don't want to be blamed that they get sick if their vitamin, and then they find out their vitamin D level is low because they never got around to doing the test. You don't even have to go to the doctor's office. Just do a finger prick. It's that easy. What about vitamin C? Orally administered vitamin C, meaning taking capsules of 1 to 3 grams a day, reduce the length of ICU stay by 8.6%. Simple and easy. In 3 trials in which patients needed mechanical ventilation, remember I said 88.1% of them die in the Journal of the American Medical Association article? Vitamin C shortened the duration of mechanical ventilation by 18%. Given the insignificant cost of vitamin C, even an 8% in an ICU stay is worth exploring. The effects of vitamin C on ICU patients should be investigated in more detail. Nobody's saying it cures COVID. Nobody is saying vitamin D cures COVID, but they help strengthen your immune system so you've got better protection. Vitamin C and other antioxidants are among currently available agents to mitigate COVID-19 associated acute respiratory distress syndrome. Given the fact that high-dose vitamin C is safe, healthcare professionals should take a close look at this opportunity. One more to talk to you about, and that is zinc. We heard earlier this year, our government was saying that hydroxychloroquine is good for you. Take it. And then later they said, no, it's not. It's not good for you. Well, I'm going to explain to you why that is, what happens with this thing about hydroxychloroquine. Quinine has been used for centuries to treat malaria. It comes from the bark of the Cinchona tree or the fever tree. Quinine's proved a highly effective treatment against the malaria parasite for over 350 years. However, it was during the 1800s that British troops in India were given quinine to take as a daily medicine to stop them contracting malaria. Now, there's no proven evidence that quinine can protect against or treat COVID-19. I want to tell that right up front. But this is why they're talking about hydroxychloroquine, because it's a pharmaceutical copy of quinine. So what do we know about this? Quinine's a really bitter substance, and to help the medicine go down, this is where the song came from. A little bit of medicine, a little bit of sugar helps the medicine go down. Because this stuff tasted so bitter, they would take fruit-flavored water, add a little sugar to it, and put the quinine in it. And that's where a little bit of sugar helps the medicine go down came from. And the British troops got permission to put a teaspoon of gin in this mixture. Thus was born the gin and tonic. This is where it came from in the 1880s. It was quinine to protect the soldiers against malaria. How does that work? Quinine and hydroxychloroquine, they help to escort zinc inside your cell. Zinc helps to prevent or reduce the virus from shedding. Now, viruses don't reproduce, they just shed. They just break off a little piece. And they only do that for primarily inside your cells, not in your bloodstream. They've got to hijack the cell. They get inside the cell to do that. But they have a really hard time doing that in the presence of zinc inside your cell. Zinc inhibits viral shedding. It doesn't stop it completely, but it reduces it dramatically. I'm just not showing you all the studies on that. So zinc inhibits viral shedding. You have to get the zinc inside your cell. Zinc in the bloodstream won't do that. It's got to get inside the cell. The problem is it's kind of hard to get zinc inside your cell. It needs an escort to get inside the cell. The escort is called an ionophore. A zinc ionophore grabs zinc out of the bloodstream and escorts it inside the cell, and then you've got more protection against a virus, if it gets inside your cell, from shedding. So the higher your zinc level inside the cell, the less viral shedding occurs. Quinine is a zinc ionophore. That's how quinine works to prevent malaria. It escorts zinc inside the cell. Hydroxychloroquine is a zinc ionophore. And when you look at the studies of hydroxychloroquine that came out after our government endorsed it back in March, you see that taking quinine, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But when you take quinine and you give the person zinc at the same time, it worked really well, much, much better. Because the people where hydroxychloroquine didn't work, they didn't have enough zinc. They were zinc deficient. So you give them zinc, now the hydroxychloroquine escorts the zinc inside the cell, and the zinc inside the cell inhibits the virus from shedding. That's how zinc works. So when I learned this, my wife and I, they're tonic water. is tonic water is a zinc ionophore. If it's got quinine in it, quinine is a zinc ionophore. The problem is that stuff is so bitter, it's really loaded with sugar. And some of the chemical tonic waters don't even have quinine in them. So you want a tonic water that says quinine and list of ingredients, but you want that's light. Fever Tree, like the name of the Cinchona tree, there's a company named Fever Tree. They've got 5 different quinine waters, and most of them are pretty high in sugar, but one of them is called India Light. And it's a little bottle, but it's only got 3 grams of sugar. So my wife and I, every day, we'll take a bottle of Fever Tree India Light tonic water in a glass, lots of ice, put half a bottle each, slice of a lime, and then fill it up with water, and we just sip it. We sip it all day long. I'll do 2 or 3 of those a day. So I'm getting some tonic water, very little sugar. It's a zinc ionophore. We take zinc in our nutrients. It's going to help. It's not going to prevent the virus, but it's going to help. No big claims about it, but it's one of the little base hits that's going to help. Vitamin D, a big base hit, maybe a double that's going to help. Vitamin C, another double that's going to help. Okay, we'll skip through that. So typically quinine in pharmaceutical doses is 500 milligrams. Tonic water contains 83 milligrams. It's not a lot, but it's a little bit. It's going to escort a little bit of zinc inside your cell. So it's going to help a little bit. But once again, please don't say that I'm saying tonic water cures COVID. Not saying that. I'm saying that it's going to help increase the zinc inside your cell, which has been shown to reduce viral shedding inside your cells. Okay, we'll just skip that. Last concept I want to give you is eating the rainbow diet. Why? Because these bright colors of the rainbow, these colors are called polyphenols. And this virus gets inside your cell because it has an attraction to a receptor. A receptor is like a catcher's mitt. Pitcher throws the ball to the catcher. There's receptor sites called ACE2 receptors. And this virus loves ACE2 receptors, and that's how it gets inside your cell. But when you have high polyphenol levels in your bloodstream, the studies show it inhibits viruses from binding to the ACE2 receptor. So you want more colorful fruits and vegetables in your diet, just to help protect you when you're exposed to a virus. It's in your bloodstream, but it doesn't shed very much. It really has to get inside the cell to shed, but it goes into the ACE2 receptors to get inside the cell. But high polyphenol count reduces the ability of a virus to bind to your ACE2 receptors. So you want more polyphenols, more bright colors in your diet. And this is a wonderful article from my friend, Dr. Deanna Minnick, talking about the rainbow diet. And we give this article to our patients and tell them to download these 3 pages of all of the different fruits and vegetables, their colors, and what the polyphenols are in them. And we say the target is a goal of 50 different foods per week. It's not really hard. You know, you get 4 or 5 at a meal, and you get 2-3 meals a day. That's 10, 15 different foods right there, right? And you do it every day. And the result is, at first you're probably doing, you got 20, 25 in your diet, but as you become more conscious about it, you can move that up to 50 foods a week pretty easily. You start experimenting with other colors of the rainbow and different colored foods. We've been getting handouts like this, Focus on Color, for 7, 8, 9 years at the Institute for Functional Medicine. So people have guidelines to follow. Don't just keep eating the same food every day. This could be considered gluten-free, but it's not healthy. It's much better to have a quinoa salad. Look at all the colors in there. And every one of those colors are polyphenols that help protect the ACE2 receptors from binders, from viruses binding onto them and getting inside your cell. That's the concept that you want to look for here. Breakfast can be challenging, but look at all the colors that you get there. I'd have a couple of fried eggs with this and some bacon, because I like bacon. Not healthy for you, but I'm not an angel, right? But I'll have something like this for breakfast, and I know I'm getting my colors. Eat fermented vegetables. Different colors of the rainbow helps build the microbiome. So in summary, prevention is the ultimate principle of wisdom. To cure a disease before, or to cure a disease after it's manifested is like digging a well when one is thirsty, or forging a weapon after the war has begun. Remember that this current threat is a lifestyle disease that makes us vulnerable. And we'll skip that one. I have a whole program to teach our practitioners about this. It's called the Certified Gluten Practitioner Program online. Thank you for your kind attention. I will stop sharing screen now so that we can go to a Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you so much, buddy. That was amazing. Okay, if anybody has a question, you can sit here. Anything else? Yeah, come on.
Hey, Doc. Question. Hey, I'm Steve Novelli. I'm a chiropractor in Buffalo, and I've been studying your work for a few years. I had a patient ask me the other day, she came in and said, hey, I had a colonoscopy. My gastrointestinal specialist said my colon was clear. It was squeaky clean. I had no polyps. I had nothing, no concerns. I think my colon's fine. I think my intestines are fine. I don't need to do anything special with my diet. And and I wasn't sure where to start with her.
I understand. It's easy. From the paradigm of their 5 pillars in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases, all chronic inflammatory diseases. If you educate your patients on this paradigm, get Fasano's article, put it in a clear plastic folder so it stays clean, not all dog-eared and all that. Take a yellow highlighter, just highlight a couple bullet points that they would understand and show it to them about the development of all diseases and that there's this paradigm and that the intestinal microbiome. So Mrs. Patient, that's great, congratulations. Your gastroenterologist tells you that the 2x4s and the drywall in your house look pretty good. There's no mold on the walls. That's great. That doesn't say anything about the microbiome, which is one of the 5 pillars in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases. It is not the walls of the house that determine if your house is healthy. That's important, of course. And by the time that's inflamed, you got a problem. There's mold growing on your walls in your bathroom, right? You got a problem. So just pivot from the concept that the test to identify a disease is suggestive of health. No,
Right.
It's not. No, it's not.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
Have a good day.
Thanks so much.
Hey, Dr. Brian, loved your talk. Very clear, very concise, very powerful. I take vitamin D, but I've always been told to take it with K2 for better absorption. Is that the case?
K2 enhances the effectiveness of vitamin D. Absolutely. Many, many studies on that. However, you don't want to just take oral liquids that are absorbed in the oral cavity, because if you think of intestinal permeability, and we absorb our nutrients by the cells opening to allow a little food to go through. It's like the Panama Canal. The gates open, the food goes in a little bit, the gates close. The immune system checks it out. The next gates open, the food goes down a little bit further between the cells, the gates close, the immune system checks it out. The gates of the Panama Canal, and there are many levels in between 2 cells. The pictures that I've seen have 5 or 6 different gates. They're called adherence junctions. And there's 5 or 6 different gates just between 2 cells. The gates of the Panama Canal are completely controlled by vitamin D. So when you have a vitamin D not K2, when you have a vitamin D insufficiency or deficiency, by definition, you're going to have leaky gut, one of the 5 pillars in the development of chronic diseases. So K2 is a valuable component to a comprehensive nutritional protocol, but you want capsules or tablets of vitamin D, and if you want it with K2, that's fine, but they get down into your gut so that vitamin D is absorbed right there where the gates are. So do not get fooled into taking just a liquid, which would be, and our products are K2 and D3. of course, but they're the liquids. So we always make sure a person is also taking at least 5,000 units of a capsule or tablet of vitamin D.
Thank you. Just one more question. What would be a good dose of vitamin C to take proactively every day?
Really good question. It's called the Pauling Protocol after Dr. Linus Pauling, only guy in the world to win the Nobel Prize twice. There was also one woman, but one man, Dr. Tilted to the side, really cute looking, kind of cool looking old guy. And he said, yes, my wife and I take 18,000 milligrams of vitamin C every day. And when we get old, we'll take more. So what do you mean when you get old? You're 84, right? But sharp mind. So the Pauling protocol is that you start with 500 milligrams or so every waking hour throughout the day. Count how many you're taking. And if you're fine, everything's good, the next day you wake up, you start again, 500 milligrams every waking hour, until you get a little gas, a little bloaty, a little loose stools, a little diarrhea, and say, okay, I took 12 tablets today. Then you take one day off so your gut calms down, and then you take 75% of that number. So if it was 12, now you're going to take 9 throughout the day. You'll space them throughout the day. And then you stay at 9, 2 days, 3 days a week, until you get loose bowels, little gas once again, and you count, okay, 9, I got loose bowels. Then you take a day off, and then you take 75% of that. So that might be 5 or 6 tablets a day. And you just tier it. You tier it to your bowel tolerance. And when you don't get gas or diarrhea anymore, that's the dose you take. So for me, it's 8,000 to 12,000 a day. So I usually take 8,000 first thing in the morning. If I take 12, I'll get a little loose bowels. That's too much for my body. So I'll have to do it a few times a day. But that's the way you tell. It's your body tolerance.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Any others? Anything in particular?
Hi, doctor. How are you? Congrats on.
Good, thank you.
Thank you so much. So I have a physical therapy company and I serve many, many patients. And I guess one of the questions would be like, how do we have a simple conversation with a patient on how to start a gluten-free lifestyle?
You're rocking their boat. You're really rocking their boat, right? Because everybody, it's the most common food in the world today, by far. And 78% of the prebiotics in the Western diet, the foods that feed the good bacteria, are the arabinoxylans from wheat. So when you put them on a gluten-free diet, you take away their prebiotics. And when you give them gluten-free food, it's just white crap. There's no nutrients in it. There's no fiber. So the person starts feeling better on a gluten-free diet right away. Sometimes they lose 10, 15, 20 pounds in a couple months without trying. Their energy's up, their joint pains are down, their inflammation's going down. But 6 months later, you've starved off so much of their microbiome that was dependent on the arabinoxylans. Now they get sick from something else because the third pillar of the 5 pillars is your microbiome. And now you've just starved the microbiome. So you have to learn how to do it properly. There is no simple way to do it. You need to do my certified gluten-free practitioner course and dial this down so that no one can argue with you. When you know the science like this, then you develop the program. And it's going to take you months to really develop the program. But the impact factor of changing people's lives by doing this is second to none. This is the only food that Fasano has shown is the most powerful trigger in creating intestinal permeability, activating toll-like receptor 4. Not dairy, not soy, not tomatoes, gluten. And Maureen Leonard shows this happens in every individual who can ingest gluten. So, because we don't dial down this topic and read the studies, It's another piece of good info. Yeah, I really should do something about that, but it's on the list along with 30 other things. I tell you, this is most important. Of anything you can do from a dietary perspective, the first thing is make sure they drink enough water. The second thing is check them to see if their immune system says they've crossed the line of tolerance and they can't eat wheat anymore. That completely changes their paradigm if you have an education system that can guide them through how to do it. We have that education system at thedoctor.com, but it took years to really refine it. We were, not thousands, 800 to 900 people now that have gone through.
Wow. Thank you very much.
You bet, man. Thanks for the question. Thanks for thinking about this that way.
One more.
Hey, Doc, how's it going?
Hi, really well. Love your sweatshirt. Thank you.
Quick question. How would you have a conversation now with the patients when the vaccine comes out? When they ask you about the vaccine, the COVID vaccine?
Yeah. I don't have a pat conversation. I would show the patient some of the studies that I showed you that, you know, we get the flu every year, and it's the old and the sick that can die from it. And that's true here also, with a few exceptions. But the way the press has been handling this has been quite challenging to embrace. And my concern about the vaccine is that they're putting nanobots in. Nanobots, little robots. And these nanobots record the vaccines that you've received so that they can scan you with an iPhone at the airport. If you don't have a nanobot, they may not let you into the country. That's what's coming down the pike. That's been talked about quite a bit. And the studies are published. The nanobots secrete metabolites that alter your neurotransmitters. And they can control the neurotransmitter impact factor by the nanobot they put in your arm. And that's a primary reason why Tesla has sent up dozens and dozens of rockets with 30 to 50 satellites in each rocket that are now all throughout our atmosphere, that are 5G satellites tuned to nanobots. This is like, what? So I don't know how to have a conversation with somebody about this yet, except to bring them up to speed on what the science is showing has been developing over the last few years. I don't have a conclusion for it.
Thank you.
You bet.
One more.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
Hey,
Jorge,
very well, thank you.
Listen, I have a question. When we talk about prebiotics, the formula between fiber and carbohydrates, 5-to-1, that's something important or not?
Not that I know of. What we recommend to our patients is that when they go shopping for their food, always buy organic, of course, but buy every root vegetable, every type of root vegetable available, and have one different root vegetable every day, because the fibers from those root vegetables feed different families of probiotics in your gut. So don't just eat sweet potatoes. Have jicama, turnips, radishes, carrots, sweet potatoes, alternate them. And then we have our patients go to Google, type in list of prebiotic foods and print the list out. And people are going to learn that a banana is a prebiotic, an onion is a prebiotic, garlic is a prebiotic. And I want them to have 2 from the list and 1 root vegetable every day. So that's the message that we are giving out in the world in terms of prebiotic foods.
Okay, well, thank you.
Nice to see you.
Hey, Tom, I just have one quick one, just from a common sense perspective, and that is, how do we deal with the mask issue? You know, any suggestions there, anything of wisdom that you can give us? You know, we're being respectful with a lot of the guidelines that are being put out there, but any words of wisdom around the issue with the mask? Because it may become even a more part of our lives than even it is now?
That's a really good question, Fab. And in my life, I'm living my life as choose my battles well, which means that when I'm out in public, I've got a mask, you know, and I've got it hooked over one ear and my hand's holding the other side of it, you know, so it's up close to my face, but I'm not putting it here unless I have to. You know, you walk into a store and they're scanning you with a thermometer and they're trying to give you antibacterial soaps and all of that, you know, so I avoid the soaps and, you know, over together, I call it like this, a nuisance. I'm trying to be respectful. I don't agree with the mask concept at all, except around people who are vulnerable, elders, or those with comorbidities. You know, I don't know it's a problem for me to be around those people because I'm not sick, but I'll respect that and I'll put the mask on. But when patients ask me about it, I say the same thing that I'm telling you, is that choose your battles well. Don't be defiant on every issue, because most of these people, the vast majority, are just sheep following the herd, you know, and if you're not putting a mask on, they think that you're a threat to their life, the life of them and their families. And so you don't want to rock that boat. That's the best that I can say at this moment.
No, it's a very wise answer, by the way. And I want to say thank you. Let's hear for Dr. Tom O'Brien. Thank you so much, as always, for your wisdom and your love and support. Can't wait to see you soon.
Thanks, Fab. I feel the same. Thank you for the opportunity.
See you soon. Bye.